Okay, now we're doing the review 5.5, and the first question is graph and label key points, show two cycles for y equals -2 tangent x. The tangent function is undefined for every odd multiple of pi over 2, so negative pi over 2, pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 5 pi over 2, and so on, because the cosine of those values is 0, and as you know, tangent tan of x equals sine of x divided by cosine of x. So wherever cosine of x is 0, we'd have an undefined situation, so we need a vertical asymptote. Anyhow, now this negative in front of the tangent function flipped the whole graph over, so instead of going like that, it's going to go like that and like that. By the way, let's label this point. This is pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, which is pi, 3 pi over 2, and so on. Now, also, how do we deal with the 2? Well, let's consider the point negative pi over 4 and pi over 4. And will you agree the tangent of pi over 4 is 1, and 2 times 1 is 2, and negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. So we're going to hit pi over 4, and we'll call this 2, negative 2, I beg your pardon, negative 2, and 2. Okay, so we're going to hit these 2 points. So here's what our function looks like. It's going to go up, hit that, and swing up like that, and we're going to go down this way and swing down like that, aren't we? So now we're going to wind up, doing the same thing here and there, and we're going to go up through there we go. And there's the graph of 2 cycles of y equals -2 tan x. Now we're going to graph number 2, y equals cotan of pi over 4x. Well, to find the period for cotangent or tangent, either one of those functions, period equals pi rather than 2 pi, just pi over b, where in this case, in the b position, we have pi over 4. So period equals pi divided by pi over 4, which equals, invert and multiply, and we get pi times 4 over pi. The pi's divide out, so we just get 4. So the period is 4. So we're going to go through one period at 4, and another one will be through 2 periods by the time we hit 8. And then our intercepts are going to be halfway between, so this will be 2, and 2 plus 4 is 6. So we've taken care of that much. And we know halfway between these two, we're going to have a 1 and 1, and let's see, halfway between this will be -1. So let's just graph this thing without, and it's going to look like that and like that. So now we can graph another one, and we get so yeah, the cotangent's function in the first quadrant, negative in the second, positive in the third, negative in the fourth, and so on. So got that one. Okay, now we're going to graph, do number 3, that's graph y equals 1/2 cosecant of 2x. Well, first of all, we need the period, and we know period equals 2 pi over b. In this case, b is 2, so period equals 2 pi over 2. The 2's divide out, so the period equals pi. Well, knowing that, then, we go through one period till we get to here, so we'll call that pi. Go through another period, call this 2 pi. And now let me stop right here. What we have is the graph of the sine function, not the graph of the cosecant function. But we need the graph of the sine function in order to find the graph of the cosecant function. So any place, by the way, cosecant of x equals 1 over sine of x. They're reciprocals, so wherever the sine value, sine value for whatever value of x, sine is 0, then we're going to have a vertical asymptote there, because otherwise we'd have division by 0, and that's undefined. So we're going to have vertical asymptote at each of these x-intercepts. Okay. Vertical asymptote. Okay, got that taken care of. Next thing, when we go ahead and graph, what happens, we get something that looks like this. Isn't this interesting? This is not hard to do at all. And you graph the secant function the very same way. You have to shift it, left or right, whatever you choose. And now, let's label these other key places. This is pi, and then this would be pi over 2. This would be pi over 4, so we can count them out. Pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4 is pi, 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, which reduces to 3 pi over 2, 7 pi over 4, 8 pi over 4, which becomes 2 pi. Now, let's put a finishing touch on it. We'll erase the sine function. Okay. Yeah, and there's the graph of y equals 1/2 cosecant of 2x, and we're done.